lovely and darling viewers, it's Jen here at Check Her Joy. Today I am going to review the Star Wars Adventure Comics, Tales from Vader's Castle, and Return to Vader's Castle. So these were micro-series that ran in October of 2018 and then October of 2019. So they're like spooky Halloween Star Wars tie-ins. They're children / all audience comics. They're from IDW, and they're kind of light and funny, but also they definitely have a darker, creepier Halloween vibe to them. The writing on both of these is by Cavan Scott. The art on the first volume, Tales from Vader's Castle, which came out in 2018. The art on this one is from Derek Charm, Chris Fenoglio, Kelley Jones, Corin Howell, Robert Hack, and Charles Paul Wilson III. The art on the second volume from 2019, Return to Vader's Castle, is by Nicoletta, Baldari, Nick Brokenshire, Francesco, Francavilla, Kelley Jones, Megan Levens, and Charles Paul Wilson III. All those names will be down in the description below. So these are basically anthologies with like a wraparound story. They're both set up as one character is telling a story within a story. And actually, the two are connected. It's kind of a continuing story into the second arc, where we have at least one character telling to another spooky, creepy stories for various different reasons. In Volume 1, we have a group of rebels landing on Mustafar, which is where Darth Vader's castle is. It's the lava planet, and the rebels get stranded. Their ship breaks down. They can't just leave, so they need to seek refuge because, you know, lava's not a great thing to get trapped in. And the only thing they can find is Vader's castle. So they are trying to sneak into Vader's castle and, I guess, contact the rebels. But one of the rebels, Scarrett, is particularly afraid, and so the others are trying to distract him with stories of things that are even more scary and terrifying, so the situation they're in doesn't seem as bad. Although, breaking into Darth Vader's castle is pretty terrifying. And the wraparound story for Volume 2, Return to Vader's Castle, sees one of the rebels that had been, left behind. He's been captured and is being tortured by one of Darth Vader's lackeys called Vanny, who is just maniacal and completely deranged. And so the two of them are telling stories back and forth to each other to be like, Vanny's trying to be like, I can psych you out and make you even more terrified. And the other rebel is being like, not actually that afraid. Here's some other things that have happened. But then there are other adventures. Each one has its own inner story where we're following other Star Wars characters as they encounter spooky, scary, creepy, monstrous things. Encountering the villains, encountering ghosts, encountering monsters. They all have a darker feel to it. But also they're still children's stories. So it gets to be scary stories to tell in the dark, where things can get dark, but nothing gets too graphic, too violent, too terribly awful. And it still contains the Star Wars adventure sense of humor and lightness and kind of parodying things. I thoroughly enjoyed these, and they are definitely good Halloween reads, or just any time of the year when you want something a little bit spooky and set in the Star Wars universe. So the wraparound story for Volume 1, Tales from Vader's Castle, sees this group of rebels landing on Mustafar. They're led by Lena Graff. We've got Scriff over here, who's terrified of everything. Hud, who's a converted thief. He used to be a thief, and now he's working for the rebels. And Crater is the android who starts us off with telling the first story to distract Scriff. And throughout the further comics, others join in with their own stories. So the first story we encounter is following Kanan and Hera, who are two rebels, I think Jedis, but definitely rebels. And they are tracking down a ship, and they find it deserted on this asteroid. And when they go to investigate, it's haunted. So all these weird, creepy, strange things are happening, and they start investigating and trying to find the occupant. The second issue has a story with Obi-Wan Kenobi. He ends up on this planet of eternal darkness, and there is a creature stalking them and terrorizing the citizens of this planet that have already suffered from the Empire to begin with. But it's like a terrifying monster that is coming and taking people and just, spooking everybody. The third issue sees Han Solo and Chewbacca. They are tasked with delivering this statue to this cursed moon. And Han's like, no problem, we got this. I'm not afraid, really, cocky and sure of himself. But when he lands on this moon, he encounters a witch. And things get a little bit witchy and magical. So the fourth one has a story from Endor with the Ewoks. Some of the children have gone missing, and so they start investigating what happened to those kids. And it becomes this incredibly dark story. The final issue in this volume has a really, really brief story about the Mustafarians, the native creatures to this planet where Darth Vader has built his castle. And they are demanding the destruction of Vader's castle. They try to overtake it. It's really short. And it just basically shows how vicious Vader can be. Which then sets us up for the group of rebels finally encountering Vader in the wraparound story. And that particularly gets dark and creepy and did not disappoint. Like, it's Vader's castle. You were, anticipating that Vader is going to show up. And he finally does. And, yeah, all kinds of dark, chaotic fighting happening. I loved it. I also love the art style for the wraparound comics, which is this very bold, simplistic style, but with dark reds and grays, and it adds its own spookiness. And the art style in each of these comics, the inner stories, each have their own vibe. Volume 2, Return to Vader's Castle. One of the rebels, Hud, did not escape. He got captured. The others managed to make it off planet, but Hud is facing Vanny, who is particularly vicious. We start off and we don't even realize he's captured Hud because he's just it sounds like he's talking to the audience. I'm going to tell you stories. You thought you were in a bad situation now, but it can get so much worse. Later we find out it's Hud, and Hud's trying to escape Vanny the entire time, and Hud starts telling his own stories back, and so we have this back and forth between the two of them trying to out-creep each other, but also there's all this internal struggle of Hud trying to hide and not get captured, and Vanny trying to find him again, and Vanny is really into the torture and being maniacal and just really evil. So the entire wraparound story got much darker. And then the inner stories, the first one sees a group of, I think, bounty hunters, and they're trying to join this one space crew, and in order to join, they have to pass this test. So they are all thrown on this stormy planet, a planet with an eternal storm, that has a haunted labyrinth. And they're told, survive. Survive, I'll come back tomorrow. Whoever makes it out alive, sane, you can join the crew. Issue 2 has a story about General Tarkin, and he has to go clean up one of his messes, basically. He was experimenting and trying to create this super creature, basically a giant Frankenstein monster made out of space aliens. And that monster escapes and tries to take revenge on Tarkin. The third issue follows a story with Aja Ventress, who is a bounty hunter and an assassin, and she gets hired to investigate disappearances of this one gang. And it's actually a planet where there are 2 different gangs that are currently at peace, but the disappearances are threatening to ramp up into violence. And so one of the gang leader hires her to check out what's actually happening. And it's not strictly speaking just the gangs that are responsible. It does get creepy. The story in issue 4 follows Jabba the Hutt and one of his cousins, Kraka, who shows up and offers Jabba this creature that he's found. for Jabba's, creature fights that he has happening. And so part of it is like the creatures fighting. But there is also another plot within this in which Kraka is trying to steal from Jabba the Hutt and sneaking around. The final issue in this volume, we have a group from the Emperor, an Imperial envoy, showing up, checking out what Vader's doing, like a status check. But they encounter the Mustafarians, who still would like Vader gone. And then we still have the final wraparound story conclusion with Hutt's final attempt to escape from Vader's castle. So for both of these, I feel like the further we got into the volumes and the further we got into the stories overall, the darker, creepier the stories got. But also there's still comics for all ages, for children, so it never gets too creepy, too dark. There's a lot of characters that we know are just going to make it out. Han Solo and Chewbacca are not going to die. This is not how Obi-Wan dies. Not how Tarkin dies. So there's like a security in knowing where these stories are taking place within their timelines, and that these are not how these characters meet their ends, but also there are legitimately scary, creepy elements happening in their stories. And yeah. So I really enjoyed these. If you also enjoy Star Wars, if you also enjoy the children's comics, like the Star Wars adventure comics, even though they're for kids, are still entertaining, fascinating, fun romps. I think that's the main review bits to talk about. I mean, there are 10 different comic issues in here. They each have different feels. So there's tons of like minor things we could get into, but I also don't want to spoil them. Like, go read them, check out these stories for yourselves. There are the backs if you wanted to see the backs. But yeah. I do recommend the Vader Castles comics. Tales from Vader's Castle and Return to Vader's Castle. Yeah. If you love Star Wars, check them out. If you love Star Wars and you love horror and you like later stuff, check these out. So, peace out. I love you guys and keep reading. Bye.